Hey everyone, it's Zahava. Welcome back to the channel. Today I thought we would do a reading vlog catch up, and I wanted to bring you up to date with some of the books that you guys have seen me do book hauls of and just let you know what I've been reading. By the time you see this video, I think it'll be my second to last video that will be coming out before the new year. So there should be one more after this one, and then there will be some more after the new year. So hopefully that'll bring everybody up to speed. I will be out of town for 3 weeks, so I want to make sure that you guys have some content, and this is pretty much going to close up the end of the year reading vlog, and I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit about the books that I've been reading so far and where I am. Right now as we're filming, it's actually November 21st, so my December reading, I will be reporting to you guys in January when I'm back from visiting my sister. So in the interim, I just wanted to bring you guys up to speed on where I am in my reading and what I've thought about the books that I have read. First, I wanted to show you guys that I have created out of an old book that I had lying around the house. It was just like a teaching journal or a learning journal, and I've created a reading journal out of it. I just changed the cover up a little bit to make it a little prettier, and I don't know how good of a job I did about that, because if you know me at all, arts and crafts, not really my thing, but what I wanted to show you is that I have started writing just little bits of notes about what I think about the books. And like here on this side of the page, you can see that there's like quotes and stuff. So I've covered those pages up with just, some note paper, just very messily, just so I could jot my ideas down. And then I will have gone ahead and cut out some book covers on sticky back paper. And I just write what the book is and what I thought of it, whatever my initial notes are, and that's sort of how I'm keeping track of it so I can remember to tell you guys these things while I am vlogging. So let's get started and talk about some of my November reads. In this month, I have finished four books that I've properly finished. 3 of them are print books, one of which is a nonfiction, and the fourth one is also a nonfiction, and that one I finished on Audible because it is nonfiction November, and I did try to read as many nonfiction books as possible. There is a 5th book that I attempted to read in November, also a nonfiction book, and I ended up having to DNF it, and we will talk about why as well. So let's start with the books that I did finish. So the first book I finished is The Book of Doors. Now this one I believe was one of the Goodreads nominees for Best Fantasy Fiction Book of the Year. It was up there with a whole bunch of others that I am unfamiliar with and have never read, but I did go ahead and vote for this one being the only one that I was familiar with. I don't know if that's really a fair vote or not, but I did read this one. And I have to say, I adored it. I really, really loved it. I finished this book in like 2 or 3 days, which for me is amazing. I, like you, am doing so many things in my life, but I love this book so much. The chapters are really short. So having short chapters is really conducive to flipping them over really quick and wanting to get to the next one and the next one and the next one. So I found myself really like ignoring everything else that had to be done. There was no cooking, there was no house cleaning, there was no paying attention to the members of my family. There was none of that happening because I was busy. Just this was my whole life for like almost 3 days, this book right here. And as it turns out, I discovered about myself that I am a fan of time travel, which I didn't know. So if you guys are unfamiliar with this book is about a girl who works in a bookshop, and she has these passing conversations with a regular customer who comes in every night, and he ends up dying pretty early in the book in her shop, and he leaves behind the last book that he was reading and then a leather-bound book, which is the titular Book of Doors. And basically Cassie, who is the main character in the story, has to sort of figure out what this mysterious book is that he's left to her, because it's left with a dedication to her, and then it just ends up being her story of discovery, and there's a little bit of time travel involved, and it's just a great fantasy where all of the loose ends tie up in such a satisfactory way. I don't know if it's my enthusiasm having been out of the book world for so many years, or really just not paying attention to booktube, bookstagram, and book talk, or other people's opinions, or what happens to be new on the market. I don't know if that has anything to do with my enthusiasm, because I remember the last reading vlog that we did, I talked to you about having read Remarkably Bright Creatures and how much I really enjoyed that one. This one too, for me, was an absolute 5-star read. So I just want you guys to know that. I went and rated this one 5 stars, and I absolutely think that this deserves to win the Goodreads award. I don't know if it will, but I do know that I am eagerly awaiting another installment from Gareth Brown. It was a debut novel, and I just am sad about that, honestly, because not only did I discover about myself that time travel is a thing for me, along with like pirates and circus, but I just really want to read anything else that this author comes out with. Again, I said it before, the chapters are really short, the language is really accessible. All of the questions that you have as a reader are neatly tied up into a nice little bow, and by the end, you know everything, all of your questions have been answered, and it was just so damn satisfying. It was just so damn satisfying. So if you guys want to go ahead, check out this fantasy book. It is fantastic. I highly recommend. For me, it was a 5-star read, and don't judge a book by its cover. It's kind of like a blah cover, but the story is great, and yeah, I just like definitely want to read another book by this author. In keeping with the fantasy theme, I also read this one here, which is called The Witch and the Tsar, and this is by Olesya Selnikova Gilmore. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. And this book here actually is one of the rarer gems, I would say. Now, on Goodreads, it was reviewed by around 4,600 and some odd people, so it's not a super well-known book. It's one that I think came to me via BookTube somehow, so I picked it up. I can't remember exactly which BookTube channel. I think it was Olive's Book Nook, but I since believe I could have been wrong when I quoted about that earlier, so I'm not really sure exactly where this book came from, but I remember adding it to my Goodreads want to read list, and then I picked it up at Book Outlet. And if you're looking for this at Book Outlet, it may have a different cover. It may have like a white cover, which I'll put up somewhere here for you guys to see so you can compare the two covers. But this book too, I read pretty quickly. It's another fantasy book. It deals with Russian folklore, the tale of Baba Yaga. But of course, the author has taken generous creative license with this one. It had mixed reviews. I'm not really sure why. I think that people that are familiar with Russian folklore probably would have taken offense as to how things have been portrayed in this book, but I am unfamiliar with Russian folklore, so for me, it was just a wild, kind of nice fantasy ride. I did find the prose a little difficult to get into, and I found myself having to reread paragraphs and lines sometimes 2 or 3 times to get my brain around where we were going, because the story is epic in the sense that, I mean, it's a standalone book for now. I don't know, because we'll get to that in a second, but when you're reading the book, it is, for all intents and purposes, a standalone novel, but it's epic in the sense that it takes place over a 20 or 20 plus year period in the 1500s, when Ivan the Terrible would have reigned over Russia. And Baba Yaga is not a Baba. She's a woman who is immortal, and she's round about 30 years of age and never grows older than that. So this book basically follows Baba Yaga as she tries to save Mother Russia from the destruction that Ivan the Terrible is unleashing all over the country. And it has, of course, a healthy dose of fantasy, witchcraft, animal companions, gods, goddesses, the whole 9 yards. And if you can suspend your disbelief, and if you can suspend what you know, if you do know anything about Russian mythology, I think that you'll have a really good time with this story. I know that I did. I can't remember if I said this or not earlier, but it did take me 5 days to finish this novel. And aside from having to reread things a lot, the reason I mention it is because if you skip sentences, if you're somebody that likes to skip sentences or skip paragraphs, this is not the book to do it with. It's not, because sometimes in the space of a single sentence or a single paragraph, you will not realize that you have skipped forward quite a few years, or you've changed settings, or you've changed dialogue, or It's a first person narrative, so you won't be changing points of view necessarily, but there's certain little spots in the book where it is told by a third person omniscient narrator, and those are labeled as interludes. So even though the story is told through Baba Yaga's point of view, there's still like an overarching kind of voice that tells you things from a different perspective. In fact, I find it's a very useful tool because then we get to know as the reader what Yaga herself doesn't know. So I really enjoyed that. And this book, at the end of it, and it's not a spoiler, but there is a twist. There is a little bit of a twist at the end of this novel, which I think, and I'm hoping to goodness, could pave the way to a sequel. And I would really like to see a sequel of this book. So if the author is watching this video, please, please, please write a sequel to this book if you don't have one in the works already, because that little twist, and if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. That little twist at the end of the book, to me, leaves this book wide open for what could be a super satisfying sequel. So I would love to see this book become a duology, and just see Yaga's story continue, because I don't know, I really enjoyed it. It had very mixed reviews. For me, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, which means that it didn't make me laugh, it didn't make me cry, but it definitely deserves a spot on the bookshelf. And I'm going to hang on to this one, hoping that another one is going to come out to follow it. You never know. So we did talk about November being nonfiction November. So first I'm going to show you guys the one nonfiction book in print that I did finish. And that one was Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. And this is the one that I think we looked at it when we did a book haul. It has to do with the story of this journalist, Jon Krakauer, who was sent on a mission from Outside Magazine to cover a story of a climb of Mount Everest back in 1996, I believe it is. And there was a huge disaster that year on the mountain. I'm sure you guys are aware of it, but if you're not, basically 12 people died. And this is his memoir, his account of his involvement in that expedition. And as you can see, I did do some annotating on this one. Not too much, like it's not to the point where the annotations are pretentious, but it's just my, because like sometimes people get, I don't know, like the book is like heavier with annotation tabs than it is with actual, you know, pages in the book. But I did annotate just like a little bit. And it was basically just to document my reactions to certain things and certain descriptions that were very visceral for me, and statistics that I thought were shocking, and little reports and things like that. So I'll just show you guys my annotation key. So I only did like 4 points, and the 4 points that I've done are things that I found interesting, when I saw some beautiful writing, when things were wowing me or shocking me, and some other various miscellaneous things. And I always leave some extra tabs in here so that in case I ever want to reread the book or lend it out to somebody else, they'll have those tabs. Everything will sort of match the cover, and we're just like adding more and more thought into the book. So I will say that this copy is actually from 1999 because there's a detailed postscript, which I will admit to having skipped, because by the time I was finished with this memoir, I just didn't care. I just didn't care anymore about the postscript. Another one of the climbers who died on a different expedition shortly after this book was published had actually released a memoir about this expedition before Into Thin Air was published. So there was like a situation of rebuttal, and what Krakauer had been accused of incorrectly reporting facts, and so he felt that he had no choice but to do a postscript rebuttal, and frankly, at that point, I just didn't care. I didn't care enough, so I didn't read it. I'm sorry to anyone who thinks that I should have, but I had mentally checked out by then, so I didn't read it. But I did enjoy this book. I think, yeah, okay, so my notes are actually telling me that the book kind of read like a novel, which I think is important to mention because it's a memoir, and memoirs tend to read like novels. I like a memoir better than a biography for that reason, because a biography feels to me like something really static, but when you're reading a memoir, you're in that person's mind, you're in the author's mind, you're in the storyteller's mind, and you know what they're thinking and what they're doing and how they're growing. So like, I am a big fan of memoir, more so than biography, because biography, as you know, you're just recounting or retelling, but it's not really like being in the person's mind, which is the distinction that I make when I say that I prefer a memoir to a biography. But this one did read like a novel, so I really did appreciate that. And Krakauer left, as far as I'm concerned, nothing out, and I felt like I got a really good representation of that story, so I was pleased. Yeah, so I ended up giving this book 4 stars on Goodreads, and I don't think that I made a little blurb about it. No, I didn't write anything else about it, just kind of gave it 4 stars, and that was it. It was a national bestseller. I picked this one up at the thrift store, I think, for $3 and change. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Would it have been worth it had I paid full price? Maybe the IKEA complex would have come into play here. I don't know. I don't know if it would have been worth it at full price. Maybe if I paid full price, I would have forced myself to like it more, but for the price that I paid, I liked it fine. And I would recommend it. I would recommend it. Now I'm going to show you a print book that I actually DNF'd. So, and not only did I DNF it once, I DNF'd it twice. So here I'm going to show you guys, it's called The Secret Life of Lobsters. Now this is one that I picked up actually at a B&B when I was staying with Eric in Maine some, I don't know, seven years ago, something like that. We went on Victoria Day weekend in Canada, which is the weekend before Memorial Day for those of you guys in the States. And so Old Orchard Beach wasn't necessarily totally opened up, so we were able to get a room at a bed and breakfast near the boardwalk there, and they had a little library that you could borrow books from if you were staying at the B&B, and this book actually came from that little library because I had started to read it while I was there, and I found it somewhat interesting, and as I was leaving, I asked them if they wouldn't mind if I could buy it from them, and they just told me go ahead and take it with. So that's what I did, and I think I had gotten to about 97 pages in, and then I started to, I guess, lose interest, and maybe it was because the vacation was winding down and we were on our way home, and I said to myself, oh, I'll just pick it up when I get home. Fast forward 7 years or 8 years, and I just found this book kind of sitting on my bookshelf, and I figured, okay, it's nonfiction November, let me cheat a little. Let me cheat a little and pick up this book again. So having shelved this book for 7 or 8 years, I picked up this book. I started again at page 97, and I got as far as page like 140 before I lost interest again. Okay, so I want to talk about this book nonetheless, because there were some good points and there were some bad points, and obviously I DNF'd it for a reason. So I want to start talking about the good points first. So what I found really interesting about this book, you have to really like lobsters, okay? You have to like lobsters, but it's not just liking lobsters. You have to like the politics that surround the whole topic. And I think that that is where this book lost me. Because while it was very interesting to find out about lobster society, how they mate, how they hunt, how they bully each other, because they are bullies. They are really bullies. I think what lost me was all of the scientific, not necessarily the scientific, but I will say the political stuff that has to do with their farming, the government regulations, where people are allowed to fish, etc., etc. And that's what I found like a little bit boring. They lost me on that. It just, I feel like the book could have been written and been like half its length and still given more than what it's giving now, because again, I don't know what the newer, more updated rules on lobster fishing are. Maybe some of you guys who are watching the video know that because you are familiar with the industry or live in Maine and are familiar with the lobster fishing laws and that, and they do touch a little bit about some agreements that the US government in Maine had with Canada with regards to the lobster fishing in the Atlantic and things like that, but like ultimately it just bored the tears out of me. Like those parts, those big chunks that were not focused on the strangeness of the animal itself lost me. So I DNF'd this book. it's no shade to the author or anybody who is in the industry or likes lobsters. If you want to learn how they have sex, if you want to learn how they hunt, if you want to learn how they usurp each other, you will find tidbits of that in this book, but those were the really only meaty things that appealed to me. And other than that, whenever they started to drone on, and it was in my mind droning on and on and on about the legalities of the fishing and the unions and the government, nah. So now I want to talk to you guys about the nonfiction book that I finished on Audible. So there was only just the one this month, and that was Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. So you guys will probably be familiar with this title. I'll put it up either in front of the chicken or in front of maybe the end table here so you guys can see the chicken. Do you guys like this chicken, by the way? Let me know if you like this chicken. I picked it up at market one day. It's made by a lady named Julie. I'll link her social media in the video down below, but she made this chicken. It cost me like $60 and I just love it. It's like the most lovely squeezable chicken ever. So I thought you guys might like to maybe suggest some names for her down in the comments below, because I have not named her. I'm thinking Penny, but if you guys have better names for her, please let me know in the comments below, and I will let you guys know what I have chosen after. So that's just a little story about the chicken. But so yeah, I read Bad Blood. I listened to it on Audible, Bad Blood by John Carreyrou, as I've said, and that is a somewhat dated covering of the story of the Theranos fraud conspiracy situation that was happening with Elizabeth Holmes back in the early 2000s. And I believe that this book kind of cloisters around just as the story broke. And the Wall Street Journal kind of ran with that piece of her story, and it sort of ends like right before any criminal charges were laid, which is why I say that it's kind of dated, because if you want to know how she was discovered, how she was, found guilty, how she was sentenced and all that you're going to have to find somewhere else, because this book, Bad Blood, just doesn't cover it, but it covers pretty much everything that led up to that point, which I think is still very valid because it's extremely, extremely detailed. I know that there is a 8-part miniseries on Disney Plus called The Dropout, I think it is, starring Amanda Seyfried. I never know how to say her name. I'll write it on the screen, but it's The Dropout. And it stars Naveen Andrews as well as Sunny, and Amanda as Elizabeth. And I couldn't really get into the series because they wanted to make it too much about her life, and I think that they were kind of humanizing her in a way that Carreyrou certainly did not in his report, in his book about the situation at Theranos. Now, I feel like there's a couple of things I want to say. Now, it's a pretty well-known story, but for those of you who don't know, just know that it's based on a true investigation. It is a nonfiction, so I'm not ruining anything, I don't think, by saying this, but the whole time I'm reading this book, I'm thinking to myself, this girl is a sociopath. She's like a total sociopath. And Carreyrou himself does not outright call her a sociopath at the end of the book, but he does allude to it, which I felt very validating. I felt was very validating, because the entire time in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, how can somebody operate this way? And how much does this girl remind me of my ex-husband? So, like totally, in another league, on another level. This girl. And that, again, is just based on my reading of Carreyrou's reporting about the incident. I was kind of under a rock while all of this was happening, because my children were very young at the time, in like 2006 to 2008 period. And I had spent and I was about 24 years old at the time, 24 to 26 years old. And I didn't have the head for like all what was going on in Silicon Valley and that kind of thing. So I wasn't really up to date with whatever was contemporary for the period in terms of like, news stories and things like that. So I think I maybe like had no idea that this was going on. But in any case, I found it to be a very interesting account. And the lengths to which this company went in order to hide the absolute poppycock that was going on in that company, it's really astounding. Like, it takes an intense level of motivation and smarts to hide something of that magnitude, and to bully people into unspeakable situations that are just, it's kind of like you have to read it for yourself. But I would say that in terms of an audiobook, I really appreciated having this on audio. I think that it was a little drawn out, and there were certain points where Carreyrou kind of lost me because he was being very descriptive about things that I just, didn't care about. What I found, and you'll probably not be surprised to learn this if you know me at all, but what I found is that when he was talking about people and what Theranos had done to their employees and how Elizabeth was treating the employees and how Sunny was treating the employees, when it had to do directly with the company versus the individual employee and people, that's where I found that I paid the most attention. But that's just me being very empathetic towards the players in this scenario. And if you know me at all, you're going to know that I'm always more interested in how the individual characters and people are doing than any sort of, setting or background type of thing. I don't know if that's making sense, but Carreyrou lost me in a few places because he was being very descriptive about setting and scientific stuff or pseudo-scientific stuff. But when he was talking about the real effects that this company had on all of the people and players involved, that's where I found that my heart went out to them the most, and where I was able to concentrate the most on the story. So, Bad Blood, did I like it? Yes. But again, it's kind of a novel that's frozen in time because it does take place and end before Elizabeth Holmes was convicted. So just bear that in mind in a sort of parentheses if you ever decide to pick it up. So that was my Audible listen for the month of November. Now, let me bring you guys up to speed as to where I am in my reading now as we are going into December, and what you can expect to hear from me when I do my December reading vlog, which should come out the first week of January. So bear with me, okay? Basically, right now on Audible, I have started listening to Lolita. So I had like 7 credits available because I had to pause my membership because I hadn't been really using up my membership credits too much on Audible. And I couldn't find a copy of Lolita on Book Outlet, which, if, by the way, you guys, you don't know, I really like to shop at Book Outlet. If you want to help support this channel and you guys want to buy books and get a coupon for yourselves, there's a link down below that you can get a coupon for yourselves that you can use and get $5 off. And if you use that coupon, I will also get $5 off, so I just want to let you guys know that. But Book Outlet did not have a copy of Lolita, and I didn't really want to buy it at full price. And since I had it for free on Audible, I decided, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and get it on Audible. And I was really happy to discover that not only is it narrated by Jeremy Irons, which is yay, I love the Borgias, but that's an aside. But I love him, and he also apparently starred in the movie, like apparently in 1997 or 1998 there was a movie also that he starred in, I don't know what rock I've been living under, everyone, but I have been living under some serious rocks, okay? So just saying, Jeremy Irons is narrating that, and I'm super happy with it. So far, it's kind of a book that I'm glad that I got on Audible. This is what I'm trying to say, because would I have picked up the copy, I would have been like droned out, like zoned out so freaking fast, because the prose is not wow. The prose is not wow. And I'm finding that unless I see that Humpert is actually doing something active, because it's kind of reading to me like a very passive script, I'm not actually paying attention all the time. So I am going to finish it, but this is where I am right now, and I'm only in like chapter 12 or something like that right now. So I'm enjoying it, but I'm only half listening to it. So you guys decide what that means. You guys decide what that means. If you've read Lolita, or you've listened to it or seen the movie, feel free to discuss it in the comments below. I feel like I'm just happy that I'm listening to it and that I didn't spend the money on the book. Even though generally speaking, and I know I've said it before on the channel, I tend to not buy fiction or novels on Audible because I feel like I don't and the proof is in the pudding, I actually don't really pay much attention to it in the end. So that's sort of where I am in my head right now in this moment with Lolita. On my nightstand, still have not, I've made some progress with The Princess Bride. I haven't finished it yet. I will let you guys know when I do. It's not because I'm unfamiliar with the story. So if you're new to this channel and you're wondering, how does she not know The Princess Bride? Dude, like, I was born in 1981. I know The Princess Bride. I know it. I've just never read the novel. So I have it kind of sitting there. I'm taking my time with that one because I really don't want to miss any of the humor, which if you guys have read this book, you will know is a riot, and I just don't want to miss any of that. So I'm taking my time with it because it's a sweet, nostalgic trip that I am just not ready. I'm not ready to get off this ride, okay? So I'm taking my time with The Princess Bride, but I should have it done by the next time we vlog and we can talk about it then. The short story collection that I've been reading called This Is How You Die, I'm really enjoying that too. So I have that one also next to my nightstand, just bringing you up to speed. I'm about halfway through it right now at this point. Why I like it is that I can read 2 or 3 stories in a sitting, and it makes me feel really accomplished. So it makes me feel very accomplished because they are short stories. They range anywhere between 4 and 7 pages. So it's very, very doable if you have a half an hour, if you just want to read before bed. It's this really interesting short story collection. I'm going to talk about it in a later video, but I'll put up the cover for you guys to see so that if you guys want to go check it out because you're into short stories, and it's kind of like science fiction. So yeah, I'm finding it really, really readable, and it just makes me feel very accomplished because I can get like 1, 2, 3 stories, whatever I feel like, under my belt, and it's kind of just like helping to push the book along for me. So I'm really enjoying that one. I do have to get a copy eventually of The Machine of Death, which is the first book that comes in that duology, but it's not really a duology because it's like Machine of Death was the first book and it had all these short stories, and then This Is How You Die has like this second set of short stories. So there's that. Okay. Lastly, I have started reading Gone Girl. When I finished the Witch and the Tsar, which I finished actually last night, I went through my TBR cart and I have like a lot of books there to choose from. I think about 60 or 70 at this point, which for me is like insane. Because I used to, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before in a previous video, but the way I used to buy books, like I didn't even know that you could buy more than 1 book at a time. Like maybe I would buy 2 books at a time if I had read the first one in a trilogy and all 3 of them were already published and I knew that I wanted to read the whole story. Then I would go back to the bookstore and buy books 2 and 3 because that way I would just have them. But I did not know that people could have TBRs like in a cart or on a shelf or have anything more than, let's say, honestly, I myself have never had more than 3 books waiting to be read at home in my life. And now I have this huge cart, which I think I showed you guys in a previous video, and it's like full of books and it keeps growing. I actually 2 days ago just bought another 13 books at Book Outlet. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, so we'll be doing like a book haul video of that eventually whenever that comes in. As far as I know, it hasn't, at the time that we're filming this video, it hasn't shipped yet, but basically, I have like another 13 books that we're going to go through together because you know me, I like to do a good book haul. All of this to say that I had a big cart from which to choose my next book, and because I'd read 2 fantasies and because I had read a few nonfictions, I was really looking to break out of that genre right now, and also I have that science fiction and the fantasy that are sitting on my nightstand, which are This Is How You Die and The Princess Bride. So I am fantasied out after The Witch and the Tsar and The Book of Doors. Like I need a mental break. I need a mental break. So I decided to pick up Gone Girl. Now, I'm not far into it. I am 27 pages in as of right now. And I can tell you that I already know this is going to be for me a 5-star read. I already know it. I already know it. Now, am I aware that this is a movie? Yes. Yes, I am. I didn't watch it because it was giving me like the heebie-jeebie vibes when I saw the previews, and I think like my husband was watching it at some point, and I just didn't like the dark sort of foreboding nature of it. And if I'm going to watch a thriller or like a psychological or even like a horror, I don't know what you would call it. Maybe horror is like not categorizing the film the right way. But if it's going to be like a psychological thriller, that affects me. Like, I'm somebody that will have nightmares about it after the fact. I don't know if you guys are like that, but I'm like that. Like, if I see something and I find it even in the remotest way visceral, I will have nightmares about that for a long time. So I figure the best way to control that is by reading, because this way I will know the story before going into the movie, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen, you know? So it's just like a way to sort of pacify myself before I go and willingly watch a movie that I know is going to give me nightmares. But this book, and again, I don't know if you guys have read it, feel free to share with me in the comments, but I'm 27 pages in, as I've said, and I am loving the writing so much. I'm loving the writing so much. I think that this author has such a quirky writing style. She's just obviously very bright. I don't know, I'm just loving the writing. I'm loving the prose. I'm loving the way that she strings together the characters' thoughts. I love how the characters are so drastically different. Not really sure why they're married. But I'm resonating with this book. So 27 pages in, I'm already thinking this is going to be a 5-star read for me. So it remains to be seen, and I will let you guys know more about it next month. After Gone Girl, I'm not really sure what I'm going to be reading after that. So I'll have to check back with you guys again after I finished this book. But for now, that's going to pretty much bring us to the end of the video. There's no other way to sort of close it off. We've run the gamut of everything that I have read this past month and what I'm sort of going into for December, starting with Lolita on Audible, starting with Gone Girl in print. And also, I still have on my Kindle The Medicine Woman of Galveston, which I haven't finished yet, but that's kind of like a casual read for me as well, along with the Princess Bride and This Is How You Die. So hopefully that's not too confusing for everybody. I always have about 4, sometimes even 5 books on rotation. Let me know if you guys do that too, because I just pick up books really depending on my mood and stuff. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of any of the books that I have picked or reported on that you guys have read, or if you haven't read them, do you think that you might pick them up based on the things that I've said? I don't know. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much if you've made it here until the end. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below, and I will see you guys again in the next one. Ciao for now.